Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
It started subtly, as these things often do. Rebecca didn't march in with a decree, but rather slipped her rules into casual conversations, as if they'd always been there, waiting for me to notice. "Dolly, I think it's a good idea for you to start being home by 8, she said one afternoon while stirring sugar into her tea. I looked up from my phone, confused. "What? Why?" She set her spoon down carefully, her smile saccharine. "You're 19, Dolly. You need structure. Discipline. Staying out late doesn't set a good example for the little ones." My stomach churned. This wasn't about me. It never was. Dad and I already agreed on 10:30. "I'm an adult, Rebecca. I don't need a new curfew." Her smile tightened into a thin line. "Being an adult doesn't mean you can just do whatever you please. This is a family home, and families follow rules." At that moment, Dad walked into the room, his brow furrowed as he overheard the tail end of the conversation. "Rules about what?" Rebecca turned to him, her tone shifting to one of exaggerated patience. "Dolly's curfew. I think 8 p.m. is more reasonable than 10:30. It's important to instill good habits now." Dad looked at her like she'd grown a second head. "She's 19, Rebecca. She doesn't need a curfew at all, let alone one earlier than what we agreed on years ago." Rebecca's cheeks flushed, but she stood her ground. "Leniency is the problem, Michael. You let her run wild. She needs boundaries." "Boundaries?" I interjected, my voice shaking with restrained anger. "I work, I go to college, I don't cause trouble. What exactly am I doing that's so wild?" Rebecca's eyes darted toward me, her gaze hardening. "It's not about what you're doing now. It's about what this kind of freedom leads to. I'm trying to protect you." Dad held up a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Rebecca, stop. Dolly and I worked out these rules a long time ago. They're not changing, period." The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's face darkened, her lips pressed into a razor-thin line. Without another word, she spun on her heel and marched upstairs, her heels clicking against the wooden steps like gunfire. Dad sighed and ran a hand through his graying hair. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. She'll cool off." But I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I found her standing in the kitchen, holding my car keys. "Rebecca, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't flinch. "You're grounded. No car for a week." I blinked, stunned. "Grounded? For what?" "For your attitude yesterday. You can't speak to me like that and expect no consequences." I snatched the keys from her hand, my heart pounding. "You don't get to ground me. You're not my parent." Her face twisted with fury. "If your father won't step up, someone has to." "I'm 19. I don't need anyone to step up. What I need is for you to back off." The sound of Dad's voice cut through the tension. "What's going on in here?" Rebecca turned to him, her face a mask of indignation. "She's being disrespectful again, Michael. I'm trying to help, but she doesn't care about authority." Dad's gaze flicked between us before settling on Rebecca. "Rebecca, we've talked about this. Dolly doesn't need you to parent her. She's an adult. Leave her alone." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but I could tell they weren't real. "So you're just going to let her walk all over me?" "No one's walking over anyone," Dad said, his voice calm but weary. "But you need to stop pushing this. It's not fair to her." Rebecca didn't reply. Instead, she grabbed her purse and stormed out the front door, slamming it behind her. Dad exhaled heavily and looked at me, his eyes apologetic. Rebecca didn't yell anymore. She didn't need to. Her silence was sharper than any argument, and the air at home felt suffocating. At breakfast the next morning, she sat across from me, slicing her toast with precision. Every scrape of the knife set my teeth on edge. "Good morning," I said, forcing a neutral tone. "Morning," she replied curtly, her eyes fixed on Dad. "Michael, did you see the mail?" The utility bill came. "Quite high this month." Dad sipped his coffee. "Probably because of the heat. We've all been using it more." Rebecca tilted her head toward me. "Or maybe someone's been leaving the lights on all night." I froze. "I haven't been leaving any lights on." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course you'd say that. I'm just pointing out we should all be mindful of waste." Dad sighed. "Rebecca, it's winter. Let's not make this an issue." Rebecca set her knife down sharply. "I'm just trying to help, but my input isn't welcome anymore. I stood abruptly. I'll eat in my room. Her voice followed me. Running away again, Dolly? You're very good at that. Later, I came home from work to find Rebecca on the couch. She didn't look up, but I felt her watching as I opened the fridge. My favorite leftovers were gone, replaced with neatly labeled containers. You looking for something? She asked sweetly. The spaghetti I saved, I replied evenly. Oh, that? The kids were hungry, so I gave it to them. You're old enough to cook for yourself, aren't you? I clenched my jaw and shut the fridge door. Dolly, this attitude of yours is why we don't get along, she added. I turned, frustration bubbling over. You're the one picking fights over nothing. I'm just trying to live my life without walking on eggshells in my own house. She stood, crossing her arms. If you're so unhappy, maybe you should move out. Adults don't need coddling. Before I could respond, Dad walked in. What's going on now? Nothing, Rebecca said quickly, her tone soft. Dolly was upset about the spaghetti. I didn't realize it was such a big deal. Dad glanced at me, but I shook my head. It's fine, I muttered and left for my room. Leaning against my door, my heart pounded. Rebecca's passive aggression was getting worse, and Dad couldn't see it. Dinner that evening was unusually formal. Rebecca had insisted on setting the table with her best plates and glasses, and my father, always eager to keep the peace, had gone along with it. The twins were giddy as they bounced in their seats, oblivious to the tension bubbling beneath the surface. Dolly, could you pass the potatoes? Rebecca asked sweetly, her voice layered with a practiced calm. I nodded and slid the dish across the table. She smiled tightly, her eyes flickering to Dad before she continued. Michael and I were talking earlier, and we had an idea about the college fund. I froze, the fork halfway to my mouth. What about it? Dad cleared his throat, a sign he wasn't fully on board with whatever was coming. Rebecca thinks, he trailed off, leaving her to finish. Rebecca folded her hands neatly, her gaze locking onto mine. Dolly, since you've been fortunate enough to have your mother save so much for you, we thought it might be generous to share some of that with the twins. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The silence in the room stretched thin, broken only by the clink of a fork dropped by one of the twins. Excuse me? I finally said, my voice trembling. Think about it, Rebecca said, her tone dripping with reasonableness. You've already been given so much, and the twins, well, they haven't had the same opportunities. My grip on the fork tightened. That's because my mom worked herself to the bone to save that money for me. Why should I have to share it? Rebecca's expression hardened. It's about family, Dolly. Sacrifice for the greater good. We all have to pitch in. Dad put up a hand. Rebecca, I told you this wasn't a good time to bring this up. When is a good time? She snapped, turning to him. You let her do whatever she wants, and now she's acting selfish when all I'm suggesting is a bit of fairness. Fairness? I echoed, my voice rising. How is it fair to take away what my mom saved for me and give it to your kids? That's not my responsibility. The twins stared wide-eyed as the argument escalated. Dad pushed back his chair, his face drawn. Enough. This discussion is over. Rebecca crossed her arms, glaring at him. You're always taking her side, Michael. No wonder she thinks she can get away with everything. I stood abruptly, my chest tight with anger. I'm not staying here for this. Running away again? Rebecca called after me, but her voice was weaker this time, like she wasn't sure she'd won. As I slammed my bedroom door shut, my heart pounded with both fury and dread. Rebecca wasn't going to let this go, and I knew the battle over my college fund was just beginning. The morning after the college fund fiasco, the air in the house felt heavier than ever. Rebecca's passive-aggressive sighs floated from the kitchen as I trudged downstairs. Dad was already gone for work, leaving me to face her wrath alone. I braced myself for the inevitable. Rebecca stood at the counter, meticulously wiping down an already spotless surface. Her lips were pressed tight, her movements sharp. Finally, she spoke. Dolly, she said, not looking up. I think it's time we had a serious conversation about respect. Respect? I echoed, already defensive. Yes, you stormed off last night and left us all sitting there like we weren't worth your time. It's rude. She turned to face me, her eyes narrowing. This is my house too, you know. I scoffed. Funny, I thought it was Dad's house. the one we've lived in since I was a kid. Her jaw tightened, but she quickly regained her composure. That attitude is exactly what I'm talking about. You're 19 now, Dolly. An adult? Adults contribute. Adults compromise. I folded my arms. You mean adults let other people take what's theirs? Her expression darkened, and for a moment I thought she might explode. Instead, she leaned closer, her voice low and icy. If you're so set on being selfish, maybe you should think about what it means to live under someone else's roof. The words hit like a slap, and for a split second I froze. Was she threatening to kick me out? Are you saying you want me to leave? I asked, my voice steady despite the panic building inside me. Rebecca didn't answer directly. She shrugged, picking up a plate to dry. I'm saying it's time to start acting like part of this family, or maybe consider if this arrangement is working for everyone. Before I could respond, Dad's car pulled into the driveway. The timing felt like a lifeline, and I rushed to the door, eager to get him on my side. The tension in the house reached a suffocating peak. Every interaction with Rebecca was a powder keg waiting for the slightest spark. By Friday evening, the explosion came. I was upstairs working on my scholarship essay when Dad called out, "Family meeting?" My stomach churned. Family meetings meant trouble, especially when Rebecca was involved. I reluctantly made my way downstairs, finding them seated on the couch. Rebecca's expression was sharp, her lips pressed into a tight line. "We need to address the constant hostility," Rebecca began, not even waiting for Dad to start. "Dolly, you've made it clear you don't respect me or this family. That kind of behavior is unacceptable." I looked at Dad, hoping for his usual neutral expression, but this time he seemed tired, defeated. "Dolly," he said gently, "it's true that things have been tense. We can't go on like this." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice tight. Rebecca smirked. "It means you've been given enough chances. You either follow the house rules or..." She trailed off, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Or what?" I snapped. "Or you leave," she finished. I froze. The words felt surreal. Dad had always been my rock, but now he was silent, his hands clasped in front of him like a man resigned to defeat. "You can't be serious," I said, looking at him. "Dad?" He sighed. "Dolly, you're an adult now. If you can't make this work." "Make what work?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "Putting up with her? Letting her steal from me? This is my college fund, my future." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. Poor Dolly, the victim. You're just like your mother. Selfish, dramatic, and completely unwilling to compromise." That was it. The final straw. "You don't get to talk about my mom," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You're nothing compared to her." Rebecca's face turned red. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't let her. "You know what?" I continued, my voice steadier now. "You can have your rules, your house, your power trips. I'm done. I'll leave." Dad's head shot up. "Dolly, wait." "No," I interrupted. "You made your choice when you let her control everything. I'm not staying here to be treated like this." I stormed upstairs, throwing my belongings into a duffel bag. My heart pounded, a mix of rage and heartbreak. Rebecca's smug face flashed in my mind, but so did Dad's weary expression. As I walked out the door, Rebecca's triumphant smile almost made me falter. Almost. I didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I was settling into my new apartment, a tiny but cozy place I could barely afford, when my phone buzzed. It was Dad. I hesitated before picking up. "Hi, Dad," I said cautiously. "Dolly," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "I've left Rebecca." "What?" I blinked, stunned. "She went too far," he admitted. "After you left, she started pushing the same demands on me, about my retirement savings, the house, everything. I realized she didn't care about us as a family. She only cared about control." For the first time in weeks, I smiled. It wasn't the ending I expected, but maybe, just maybe, it was the one we both needed.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.